Welcome back to another episode of On a Mission. I'm your host, Dr. Wendy Norfleet with Norfleet Integrated Solutions. And it's my pleasure to have with me today Ken Yager with Newpoint Advisors Corporation. Welcome, Ken.
Welcome, Wendy. Thank you.
So, Ken, let's start off by learning a little bit about you. So please share what you want us to know.
Okay, very good. Well, I am a turnaround consultant, a financial advisor. I've been doing this for over 30 years, and I've also had an entrepreneurial path of my own. And I've had this desire to help small businesses. And so I spent an early part of my career investment banking, commercial banking, accounting, learning some trade skills, even some operation things. And at some point decided through my turnaround work that while I was able to address big companies, there were a lot more small companies, and there was nobody there to help them in that time of need when they go from, as we'll discuss, from being stressed out, as most entrepreneurs are, to distressed and looking at really, their venture ending in some way, unfortunately.
Right.
And so I dedicated myself to that 9.5 years ago, creating Newpoint Advisors, and started out with myself, and now we're up to 30 professionals around the U.S.
Wow, that's great. And so, as an entrepreneur, I think we all deal with stress.
Yes.
And I don't know about anyone else, but I know for me, sometimes stress motivates me. A certain level of stress,
Yes.
I think, is good for us.
Right.
But I do agree there's a difference between stress and distress. So why don't you tell us a little bit about the difference and how a turnaround management service can help you with that?
Right. That's a great point. Because we are consultants, and there are so many consultants out there, people who have good advice, and for many different stages of a development of an entrepreneur's career.
Right. Some of them specialize in like really specific areas.
Yes.
And will get you over that. But then when you get to the next level of stress, what do you do?
It's always these levels as
Right.
you're going up. And we actually, it's funny because most people think of turnarounds as a situation where where my business might be dying. I'm maybe in an industry that isn't doing as well, and I'm having a hard time too. Sometimes it's cyclical, if there's a recession or something like that. But half of our clients are actually companies that are growing, but they're getting to a spot where they're growing themselves to death. No matter how much adrenaline they have, how hard they work, it seems to get worse.
Right.
So there's something missing in the formula, and it's not that that they can't be fixed at this point, but that now time has gotten to be a critical issue.
Right, because if it's not fixed sooner rather than later,
right.
It can be detrimental.
Yes, exactly. Now we have to address these things, and so we look at things that we call the immediate threats in a business, and it can be different for every single entrepreneur and every single business. What we go through a proprietary system that we developed that allows us to sort out with an entrepreneur who's high on the adrenaline, a little bit scared with what is it that I'm not doing right, and being able to be vulnerable for a moment when, as most of them as being the self-appointed CEO or the leader of an organization, have a hard time undressing that issue in front of everyone and saying, okay, yes, I made a mistake. And so we're there to help them see that and also then get past that and just start fixing the problem in a way that is productive for everybody, including them as a person, the company, and then the jobs that they've created.
Well, that's great.
But also doing it, and again, on this compressed timetable always.
Right, because a lot of times, you look at it and you say, oh, next year to get better, but if you don't address it now, next year it may not come as far as for the business.
Yes, and we spend a couple of things that happen with entrepreneurs, we know that as they're struggling, distressing, usually there's a lot of stress around making payroll.
Right.
Right, that just always seems to be that one thing. The bigger you get, the more payroll, the harder it is to hit that number. And what we find is a lot of companies, when it's that next payroll, that last payroll just keeps getting tighter and tighter. Or when you've turned to your outside sources, maybe you've gotten a loan or you've got family money or you've got investors, but that doesn't seem to be a resource now either for those things. You've hit a zone of distress.
Right.
And now it's time to look at a slightly different batch of people. And for ourselves, our goal is not to be around for very long because the situation should cure itself very quickly.
Right.
You didn't have a lot of time, so we don't have a lot of time. So we work quickly, get in, get out, and that's the point of it, and then go back to having the entrepreneurial dreams and the regular stress.
Okay.
But it's a timetable, and the thing that we worry about the most is, in the stat that you and I know well as entrepreneurs, 70% of all businesses fail by 10 years out.
Right.
Well, there are about 600,000 companies a year that start every year. That's a lot of failure.
It is.
And so our goal as a national firm is to be there with small companies to try and help them get over that hump in that moment of need and then move on.
Okay. So When you're doing this, are you, I know all companies can't be helped. I mean,
That's right.
Much as you would like to help all companies. So I'm assuming you do some type of assessment before you take on a organization as a client.
Yes, there are three things that we really get boiled down to. One is that assessment. And so we have a proprietary tool at Newpoint called TAME. TAME is an acronym for Turnaround Action Matrix Evaluation.
Okay.
It's designed for working with small companies, not with the big companies that have lots of data.
Right.
But with an entrepreneur who is struggling and really mostly...
Knows it has its details,
Yeah,
right?
it doesn't have all those details knocked down. They don't have a big, systems with lots of data flowing and it's just got an analyst in the back crunching numbers.
Right.
It's them. So how do we define what distress versus distress is? This process allows us to get to that. So it takes only a few hours of interviewing someone, and then we can start to get down to the tactical issues. The second thing is, in every single entrepreneurial distress moment, cash flow is ever present as an issue. We just talked about not being able to make payroll. That's a cash flow issue. So we have cash flow coaches on our team that show people how to get through planning on a weekly basis. How do I manage cash without interrupting the entrepreneurial pace that they were already on? And the last thing we do is we are very creative at finding capital for companies like that in distress moments. There are niches of capital that we can go to in certain circumstances to help them out. So lining up a story, laying out a plan for how the short term, and then talking to third-party resources is a way to get through those positive those issues where we can change those. We're also there when it can't go forward. And this is a critical conversation you have to have, because trying too hard can cause damage. Just like trying to exercise when it hurts.
At some point, you got to call it. You got to call it.
Yes, it's okay to call it, especially because you've got people around you who can soften the landing, and then get you on your entrepreneurial way with the lessons learned. Right,
because I know people who first time or two. I even think about Kendra Scott's story.
Yes.
She had a hat company, but unfortunately she got it after the hat craze went out. And so, but you think about some of these entrepreneurs that had companies and they failed, but now they're like, multimillionaires.
Exactly.
And so you take those lessons and you roll with it.
Yes.
And you start a new venture.
Exactly. So for those who pay attention to Silicon Valley, they will tell you, fail fast.
Right.
Go try everything, but when it fails, it fails. Okay.
Right. It's okay. Take those lessons and move it forward. Just don't make the same mistakes.
The trouble we all run into as human beings is, especially when you are very small, is that adrenaline we talked about in stress causes you to move past the distress. You don't really feel the pain in the moment, but it's very real and very present. But there are options. And our goal is that failure that we're talking about and the moving on doesn't have to be let it go and try again. It can be, what can we do to reset? As some people have talked about, creative destruction, which is this process of going through and saying what's working, what's not in the moment before it's too late. And that's what we try to help them with. Let's get critical and go to a place where there's a little bit of pain, but not the failure pain. But we can help them with that in a short period of time. Usually in several weeks.
I was going to ask you how long. Usually
several weeks to a couple of weeks to assess what's going on. Maybe a couple of days, depending on the speed and size of the company. And then we always tell people within 4 months, you should be on the other side of this. If you're a candidate for this, then within 4 months you should be on the other side. Exactly.
Wow, Ken, that is great. So if someone out there, since there's so many entrepreneurs, want to know more about you, more about the organization, to find out maybe they're almost at that point where they need someone to come in and take an assessment, how do they reach you?
Well, let's talk about the focus here too. We work with companies who've reached a revenue threshold of about $1 million.
Okay.
Our average client's upwards of 10 million, but below that. But we work with companies up to 1 to 50 million is the place. So if they're in that zone, then we have great tools to help them out.
Okay.
They should look at our website.
What's the website?
Newpoint Advisors.us. So we're .us, not .com. You may find us, but we're newpointadvisors.us.
US. Okay.
There's a 1-800 number, 1-800-306-1250. We're on LinkedIn as well. We don't have much of a Facebook presence and things like that, but those are places to look for us, and someone will be in touch with them within minutes, if not hours.
Okay. All right, Ken, thank you so much for sharing all this information, and I really appreciate you coming on as a guest.
Same here. I hope both of us can help some people with this call today.
Okay, great.
All right, thank you.
Thank you for joining us today. To learn more about Ken Yager and Newpoint Advisors Corporation, please go to newpointadvisors.us, and we'll see you next time on Buzz TV.